Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Melissa Salima, and I am a member of the InfoHio instructional team. Today is the second of two sessions that will train content providers who work for or represent organizations and agencies who have educational content that they would like to contribute to open space. Educators will then be able to find and use that content as part of their curriculum using open space. So if you want to watch or share the first recording, there's a link associated on the training links there. So the bit.ly link that's on the slide that you see on your screen now is also being shared in the chat. And just below it on the slide on my screen is a link for the training links, which just kind of curates that whole collection there for you so you have them all in one space. But I'll also demonstrate that where you can find those recordings for today as well. So today's training is also being recorded and will be made available a little bit later. I have placed everyone on mute for the first part of the training. During the training, if you could use the chat to ask any questions that you might have, I'll periodically stop to and pause to address any of those questions throughout. And then we'll also have some time at the end dedicated to answering any remaining questions where you are welcome to unmute at that time. So in the first session, we identified who content providers are and the value of contributing content to open space. We walked through the steps to add individual pieces of content that is currently available on the web. Today, we're going to connect those steps to an option that you have as a content provider to bulk upload content using a spreadsheet. So for those of you who will be using the option to bulk upload content, we suggest requesting to become a content provider. By visiting support.infohio.org, you're going to let us know that you're ready to be set up as a content provider, and then we'll take it from there. And I'll remind you of those steps towards the end of our training today. You'll learn today about some additional options that give you the ability from your organization to add content that gives you even greater exposure and the ability to further connect your content together in open space. So in the first session, one of the suggestions to prepare yourself as a content provider was to plan for the open space platform, creating consistency with the metadata that makes your content easily searchable for educators. So when it comes to adding content in bulk, this is where all of that planning is going to pay off. Once an item is added to open space, educators can search and filter results based on the criteria that you've assigned to the content. Educators can also collaborate and save content using groups, as well as they can add their own content. We focused on adding items just one at a time in the first session, and now we're going to take a look at how we can put batches of content together at one time. So here's that finished product that we looked at in the first training. No matter whether you're adding content piece by piece or a lot at one time, this is how the content will be displayed once it's published. So today we will look at using a spreadsheet to identify each of these items and how to include them as part of the labeling and metadata use. So to get started, you'll want to visit infohio.org/OER/OpenSpace. And again, that link is part of the training links collection associated with the presentation today. You'll scroll down until you see this section of the page. And this is where you're going to find information about connecting with us to become an established content provider and a link to the metadata template. So this is where you'll want to download that template. It comes in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. We are going to literally cover the spreadsheet A to Z today. So once you've added all of your content, you'll want to save it and place a support ticket. We'll cover that process at the end as well. And then we'll work with you to add your content. But just again, a little bit more on that submission process later. So here's a brief look. Oops. Here's a brief look at all the columns, the rows, and the tabs that appear in the spreadsheet. Just take a quick note here. I'm just giving a brief overview that the columns identify all the details about the content that each row represents for an individual item. And then there are some tabs across the bottom that provide the correct terminology for specific columns. Then the colors that you see across the spreadsheet are also of significance. So this may seem like a lot of information. I'm not expecting you to gather anything major from this slide other than that there's a lot here. And so what I would really like you to take away from this is that Compared to our first training from submitting an individual piece of content broken down by area, this is where having a plan for the content that you are contributing that is organized and it uses that consistent metadata is going to improve the efficiency and the outcomes once your content is published. So now we're going to kind of take this section by section and dig a little bit deeper into the first few columns and rows. The first column shows you what you will find in each row. And then across row 1 and 2 are the field names and a sample record. These will match up with the information that we entered as part of step 1 and step 2 from the first training. Then in row 3, you have the field descriptions. Think of these as the instructions that go along with information for your content. If there are specific descriptors that are needed from one of the tabs, you'll find those directions here. Then you'll also see that quite a few of the fields require the use of a pipe character to separate multiple entries within a single cell. So in case you're unfamiliar with it, this key is uniquely located on your keyboard, but here's an example of where you might locate it. Then in row 4, you'll see any notes about what fields are required. Notice anything that is highlighted in yellow is a required field. And then the tabs beneath are important to the terminology used in the spreadsheet. Metadata fields will provide you with all of the definitions for each field type, while the field use and vocabularies and the custom subject taxonomy tabs will provide lists of terminology using the same language seen in the drop-down menus during the last training. So those tabs are really helpful at helping dissect all of those different pieces. So the metadata fields tab, this is that tab that's going to help kind of translate what we talked about from the first training to what it looks like for a bulk upload. So we're going to take that a step further. The field name will represent that name associated with the information you enter in that column. And in some cases, the field name is the same as the name we saw in the first training, but sometimes that name can appear differently. So we'll take a closer look at those differences as we continue. And then in field descriptions, identify the information that you will enter and what tabs at the bottom can help you identify the correct terminology. So it's going to help you get the right words in the right place. The sample record is going to serve as an example or an exemplar for what information could look like in each field as you fill it in. And then we're going to work our way across the entire row for a single entry. Those required fields, again, highlighted in yellow. So we're going to match these columns up with the information that we covered from the first training now. So we take a step back and we take a look at the tool that we used for entering a single piece of content. There were 3 steps to adding a single resource. We're going to match that information up into the similar steps that we have today. It's important to note that these steps for entering a single piece of content from the last training will be in a different order than the way they were entered into the spreadsheet this time. So those steps originally were providing the URL, then assigning the metadata, and then finally submitting for approval. Generally speaking, we're going to follow those same steps again, except we're going to stop and take a look at a lot of different details in the different fields of the spreadsheet. You're still going to need to copy and paste the complete URL for the content available for your organization. So this is for the content that lives on your organization's site. So in column C of the spreadsheet, using the title displayed CR_URL is where you will paste the link. And then similarly for the title, this is going to go in column B. And then the description will go in column G. And just a reminder that the description, you may want to look for an existing description that's available wherever this content lives on the web. Column I is the field name for the title. So this is where you will record the license type. So it's a little bit different here. When we looked at the conditions of use during the first training, we recommended selecting the Creative Commons license that applies to your item. But if the content doesn't have any of these conditions listed on the document itself, then you would select, I don't see any of these. But on the spreadsheet, if you don't put anything or you're not sure what to put, we'll talk to you about what is appropriate during the review process. Then in some cases, you may have something you are adding that is marked as copyright. And in the previous training, we asked you just to go ahead and mark, I don't see any of these. And then we would help you update it later. However, using the spreadsheet, you're actually going to have the ability to choose the appropriate copyright license using the tab on the spreadsheet called Field Use and Vocabularies. You'll have all of those available to you through this method. Now, this is the area that broke down most of the metadata that was available to you when adding a single resource. Here's our bird's eye view of the metadata from session 1, where we talked about applying metadata using the mindset of a teacher, being a win-win. So you're going to see all of the information represented in the spreadsheet here, and some of the information will appear in those highlighted yellow columns. All the fields shown here with a word bubble next to them is what's going to make up those remaining yellow highlighted columns in the spreadsheet. Please notice that they're not in column order. Most of the required yellow highlighted columns appear, though, through columns B through L. There is one outlier towards the far right of the spreadsheet in column V for educational use. And then a reminder to remember that importance of selecting those tags to help connect your content together. Column L is the place to add them. So just remember to use that pipe character I mentioned earlier to separate those multiple tags in this cell. So we kind of put all of that together so far. Those yellow required fields, that's where our focus has been so far. Columns B through L, one a little bit further to the right for V, and then those tabs at the bottom are really going to be useful to find the correct terminology. So you're not necessarily writing in your own terminology unless you're doing something like for tags, but you're going to be specifically using the information from those tags to help fill in the spreadsheet. And then of course, using that pipe key to help separate multiple entries within a cell. So during the first training, it was briefly mentioned that the fields for provider and provider sets are additional options available to established content providers. In this example, the provider is Commonwealth of Learning, Digital Public Library of America. And this item was published to a provider set that the content provider named Commonwealth Certificate for Teacher ICT Integration. Okay, so while that's a mouthful, what we want to distinguish here is there's a provider and a provider set here. And then additionally, this content has an author who has received attribution. So each of your situations may be a little bit different, but the value in using provider sets is similar to how tags work. It's another avenue to help connect groups of similar content together within your organization's content. So as a content provider, you can decide on provider sets that serve the purpose of organizing groups of content so that you can be associated with each other using that hyperlink that appears for provider sets, provider, or author. So provider sets and tags do work similarly. Think of provider sets as the internal tags for your organization's content, and then tags as a way to not only connect together your content, but also to connect that content to other content providers or other contributors using those same tags. Now let's talk about the remaining columns. We focused so far on the required columns, but there are a number of other columns that are not necessarily required. Blue and orange columns are not required, but are recommended when the information is available. And remember, there was one yellow column outlier for educational use that I mentioned a couple slides ago. Column N, O, and P represent the space to enter the information we looked at on the previous slide: provider, provider set, and author. And remember, it's important to determine how your organization's name will appear here. And that's something we'll work with you during the setup for you becoming a content provider, so that educators will recognize you or your content. These three columns are also going to represent how you plan to organize your content and could determine if you want to add content in waves or stages if you have multiple provider sets. Next up are educational standards. This was the section in the last training where you may have determined that your content doesn't quite fall into a standards alignment category, or maybe you just don't consider yourself an expert when it comes to standards aligning the content that you wish to contribute. And that's really okay. While this is a searchable field for educators to locate content, it is not required. When adding content using the add OER from web method, you are adding items one at a time. So in this case, you'll be prompted after each dropdown to select the next step in the alignment process. The information that you will need to enter in the spreadsheet is what is listed as the alignment tag, also known as the indicator from the Ohio Learning Standards. Column W is where you're going to enter one or more of those alignment codes or indicators separated by the pipe character that we previously talked about. Then if you visit OpenSpace on the home page and click on the standard drop-down box, you can view all of the Ohio Learning Standards that you can choose alignments from. If you want to take a look at them all together, there's a link from ODE that you can view all of them at one time. Now we've almost made it through the entire alphabet, from A all the way to Z. There's just a couple more places to touch on. In column M, this is going to allow you to place a date in the format of a 2-digit format to share the date the content was originally created. If you had additional information that should be shared regarding the licensing associated with the content, you have additional space to use in columns O and U. Please just note that this area should only be used if you have information that's relevant to those sections. Then in column X, you have the option to include accessibility options. So while this is not required, this is a good field to consider using. Options for accessibility can be found by looking at that field use and vocabularies tab. And then finally, we have columns Y and Z. So feel free to set column Y to pending. If you don't, then we're going to help you out and set it for you. This is going to be important to that review process. Then in column Z, this is specifically for groups. So typically you probably want to leave this blank unless your organization belongs to an open space group and you want that content to also appear in that group. This is where we would set that up. It's a more intricate detail, so if it's something you think it's worth discussing, you'll want to reach out to us directly. Then the final step for adding from the web in our first training was to preview the information you've entered, make any corrections or adjustments, and then submit the resource. Once you're finished entering the content information into the spreadsheet and submit it for review, your content will be uploaded as pending, just how we talked about on the previous in column Y, but it'll be without an image. And during that process of when it's pending, that's when you'll be able to go back in and review the content while it's pending and add the image. And that's something that we will work with you once it's been submitted to let you know what stage of the process we're in. So let's kind of revisit back where we were when we talk about plan for the platform. We talked about consistency a lot. So making sure if you haven't already established what consistent use of your organization's name will be important. And then as we talked about tags before being important on the first training, now we've introduced provider sets as well. So thinking about how you might be able to have sets of content as part of what you contribute to open space that can help connect your content internally. And of course, creating that uniform metadata and grouping the like content, prioritizing it, and considering how much content you want to include each time. So as I mentioned towards the beginning of the training, the information for content providers can be found on InfoOhio's website. And there's a link in our training docs today that brings you here. So not only are you able to find the metadata template, information on how to reach out to us, but just below this, you'll actually find the links for the recordings, including a couple weeks ago and the one being recorded today. And then once your item's been published, you'll be able to return back to the open space page and use all that metadata you entered to find the content. So some steps that you want to consider next as we kind of arrive at the end of this process here. First, make sure that you've reached out to us to request that you have become a content provider. The steps there outline what to do when you arrive at support.infohio.org and how to best get in contact with us. And then the next step is work your plan. So at the end of the last training, I suggested that kind of get your feet wet. Consider adding a piece of content and using the from the web format. And that's still an option. That may be still something you want to do if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. But if you already have a plan and you have an idea of what content what you want to add, at what stage you want to add it, what comes first, you may want to start working that plan and take a look at the spreadsheet a little closer now. Make sure to select a subset of content and try entering it. So rather than try to do it all at one time, start small, make sure you understand the process, work with us to get some content added, and that will help make the process even smoother. Of course, watch or share those recordings with others that you might be working with on your team, or maybe you're thinking, I need to bring somebody else into this to kind of assist with this thinking. And then once you're ready to submit, or you need some help, connect with us. Use that same path at support.infohio.org through databases and websites, and then open space to let us know that you need some help to work something out. So at this point in time, I'm kind of looking through here. I do not see any questions in the chat, but if anyone has a question and would like to unmute, we'd be happy to take those at this time. This does bring us to the conclusion of the training, but we will be staying on for a few more minutes to see if any questions do come up as things wrap up for today. If you are finished and you don't have any other questions, you're free to leave the training for the day. Thank you again for joining us, and do know that we are definitely here to support you through this process, and we appreciate you joining us today. Yes, go ahead.
When I went on and just registered originally, it's going to be under my name. But when I email you at the support info Ohio to become a content provider, I can then tell you that it needs to be under our organization's name. Is that correct? Because I wouldn't necessarily want them to be attributed to me. I'm just the person that registered to log in originally.
Correct. So you're going to, and when you signed up for your open space account, did you use your organization's email?
Yes, but it's my name,
It's your
organization.
Yes.
Yeah, my ESC.
Right. So as part of the process, you're correct. You're going to be set up as the organization will be set up as a content provider, and you will be acting on behalf of them.
Okay.
So it's not that your name is going to appear there unless you attribute yourself as the author. There, it'll show up as provider or provider set or author on the published record.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So just to kind of follow up on that, can one organization have multiple content providers within that?
So the contributor as the content provider,
Contributor, yes, contributor.
So do you have multiple organizations within your one organization, or would it possibly be that you would want to
Melissa, I'll go ahead and chime in.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, Amy, you can do that. So if you wanted to have your ESC as the content provider, you can have multiple folks in your ESC that we can attribute to your organization. So that's absolutely possible. And if you think that you would kind of be in that camp, please let us know, because there's a little something extra that we can do. We can set up, we can create it as a specific organization in there. We can even set up something that's called an organizational admin, so that somebody from your organization can be the designated person to just kind of keep an eye on everything that is contributed by anybody from your organization. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you, Erica. So we probably need to talk about how we go about doing that. And we can just send you the names of those we'd like to be content providers or contributors.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,